Right now, planet Earth is spinning on time. All the galaxies are doing great. The cosmos is in perfect order. And yet, there could be one small little nasty thought that could be crawling in your head that may make you say, "What a bad day." The life that is being bestowed to us is for living and not for thinking about life. We need to constantly keep asking ourselves, are we living beings or thinking beings? Because most often we only keep thinking about life than living life. The psychologists say that on an average, a human being on an average processes approximately between 60,000 to 80,000 thoughts a day. None of us count the number of thoughts we process, but approximately on an average 60 to 80,000 thoughts are processed. Interestingly, more than 95% of these thoughts are repeated every day. It's not as though we are thinking something very new. More than 95% of these 60,000 plus thoughts are repeated every day. Now, at the physical level, every thought releases a shower of chemicals, whether we realize it or not. Talk to a neuroscientist and he would say, our brain has 100 billion neurons. Every neuron has 1,000 connections, and every connection fires at 200 times per second, resulting in 20,000 trillion calculations per second happening in our brains. 20,000 trillion calculations are happening in our brain per second. This must be taking loads and loads and loads of vital life energy available to us. Even a small fraction of savings, even a small reduction in the number of thoughts that we process on a day-to-day basis can make a massive difference to our well-being and wholeness. No wonder our Shastras give prime importance to the sadhana of dhyana. We are relishing the 6th chapter of the Gita, the summary of the 6th chapter, titled Dhyana Yoga, Yoga of Meditation. Jnana karmatmike nishte yogalakshe susamskrite atmanubhuti siddhyarte purva shatkena chodite. We are also successfully concluding the purva shatka. Gita can be divided into 3 parts, 3 shatkas, each of comprising 6 chapters. 6th chapter is the conclusion of the first shatka. Jnana karmatmike nishte yogalakshe susamskrite. In the first 6 chapters of the Gita, Krishna discusses the doctrines of Jnana Yoga and Karma Yoga. Well decorated, susamskrite, well decorated by Jnana and Vairagya. For the object of, what is the objective, what is the goal of the first 6 chapters? Atma Avalokana, Atma Sakshatkara. self-realization, Atmavalokana, the vision of our Atman which transcends the body as distinct and different from the body. Atmalaksha, Yoga Lakshe Susanskrite, Atmanubhuti Siddhyarte Purva Shatkena Chodite. Atmanubhuti, Anubhuti means experiencing. In order to experience our own true nature, the sadhanas of Jnana Yoga and Karma Yoga are prescribed in the first 6 chapters of the Gita. And the first 6 chapters, the first Shadga concludes appropriately with a discussion on Dhyana Yoga. Dhyana, the yoga of meditation. The moment we talk about Dhyana, immediately we all start wondering, is Dhyana really possible at all? I am not cut out to meditate. When our Shastras prescribe meditation, Dhyana, the first question that we often ask is how practical it is, how easy it is. It seems to be not very easy. But whether we realize it or not, we are all experts in meditation. We are all experts in meditation. You may wonder, why am I saying that? Dhyayato vishayan pumsaha sangasteshu upajayate. We are all attached to so many things, and this attachment happens only because of constant dhyana. We are all good experts in Vishaya Dhyana. We are constantly contemplating on the worldly objects, the worldliness. So that dhyana comes very naturally to us. So meditation is not something alien to us. We are all meditating on something or the other. Only Krishna Dhyana seems to be difficult. Vishaya Dhyana is so very easy. So Dhyana Yoga is essentially trying to help us to transform the nature of our meditation. We are all meditating every day. We are constantly meditating. It is just that what is the object of meditation and what is the objective of meditation needs to be properly understood. And once the nature of meditation changes, when the Vishaya gets transformed, when Vishaya Dhyana gets transformed to Krishna Dhyana, that process, that sadhana, that is the Dhyana Yoga that Gita teaches us. Anashrita karmapalam karyam karma karoti yaha sa sannyasi cha yogi cha na niragnir na chakriyaha. The 6th chapter begins with Krishna talking about, clarifying how a sannyasi and a yogi are one and the same. We don't need to confuse a sannyasi and a yogi. The purpose of sannyasa and yoga are one and the same. Atmavalokana, Atma Sakshatkara, realizing our true nature, our true identity, overcoming this delusion of misidentity. The purpose is the same. So therefore, Krishna says, Anashrita karma phalam, karyam karma karoti yaha. Who is a sannyasi? Who is a yogi? Anashrita karma phalam. He beautifully uses the word ashrita. Ashrita means taking refuge. He says anashritaha, the one who does not take refuge. He does not take refuge in karma phala, the results, the rewards. Do not take refuge in the rewards of an action. When we start taking refuge, means we are dependent. Every action that we do, we are dependent on the results of the action. There is an expectation of a result. And not only an expectation, we are dependent on the action. To such an extent, because of this dependence, when the mind takes ashraya, which means the result is in the future. So the mind is always in the future. The mind is always in the future. When we are attached to the result, when we are totally dependent on the result, every action that we do, the result can never be in the present. The result is always in the future. And therefore, by default, the mind operates in the future. So therefore, who is a yogi? Who is a sannyasi? The one who is not dependent on the results of the actions that he does. And karyam karma karoti yaha. One continues to perform one's prescribed, ordained duty. The one who does not abandon the prescribed duties, ordained duties. One does not abandon the world. No. One thing is always clear in the Gita. Sannyasa is not about abandoning the world. Sannyasa is continuing to engage with the world and abandoning one's attachment to the results of every action that one performs. Now, karyam karma karoti yaha. Performing one's actions as duties, attending to one's work. Now, we need to underline the verb attend. No, attend. Attend to the action that is being done, because this is where the problem is. We may intend to do a right action, but do we have the attention when we perform the action? Because most of the work that we do, we all say this, we are absent-minded. Now, absent-mindedness is not the absence of the mind. Absent-mindedness is that the mind is not in the present. The mind is not absent. The mind is not in the present. Absent-mindedness is absence of lack of control over the mind. So a yogi, a sannyasi is one whose mind is in the present. How can the mind be in the present? When it is not attached to the results. When there is complete independence from the result, from the expectation of the results, the mind operates only in the present. When the mind operates in the present, then the action that is being performed turns out to be the best possible effort, endeavor that one can do. Karyam karma karoti yaha. So therefore, Krishna right at the beginning of the 6th chapter prepares us for Dhyana Yoga, and he says what is important to realize is the role of renunciation, sannyasa. Renunciation is not about giving up worldly things. Giving up worldly things can be also defined as renunciation. But renunciation is much more. Renunciation is giving up worldly thoughts. One need not give up worldly things, but one can renounce by giving up worldly thoughts. That's why Krishna gave the example of Janaka in the 3rd chapter. Now, one can be an emperor, can still be a great karma yogi, can be a sannyasi. One can rule the world, but still be a sannyasi by not being attached to worldliness, not be immersed in worldliness. So therefore, the role of renunciation becomes so very foundational. Renunciation is not deprivation. Many times, the thought of giving up things that seem to be dear to us makes us very uncomfortable, not easy. It's like, are we depriving ourselves of good things of life? In fact, renunciation, instead of leading to deprivation, actually leads to real satisfaction, real contentment. Now, if you take the analogy of someone eating sugar, now ask a diabetic patient. Avoiding sugar is not deprivation to them. Why? Because there is a clear purpose there which is helping them renounce. Now, a diabetic patient saying, I have renounced sugar, is essentially being driven by an overriding purpose there. So therefore, when there is a purpose, a clear-cut purpose, then it becomes very easy to renounce. So Krishna, therefore, right at the beginning of the 6th chapter, he talks about the significance of renunciation and a role on the role of renunciation in the performance of Karma Yoga. And he leads to the topic of Yoga Rudha. So Krishna calls one a Yoga Rudha, the one who Yoga Arudha. Arudha means climbing. The one who has climbed, ascended the steps of performing yoga and has reached the summit of Atmavalokana, who has reached the summit where one is able to experience one's own true nature. He is a Yoga Rudha. So simply put, everyone is a Mudha, everyone who is a slave to the world is a Mudha. We all think we all are masters, but unfortunately we are slaves to our own desires, slaves to worldly objects, and therefore a Mudha is one who surrenders to the worldly objects. A Yoga Rudha, in contrast, makes the worldly object surrender to him. He has absolute mastery over his senses, and therefore instead of surrendering to the worldly objects, he masters his senses and the worldly objects surrender to him. It is not necessary that one must renounce anything to do with the world. One can still have things at this, but can be above attachment to these. So therefore, Krishna defines a Yoga Rudha as one who has ascended the steps of yoga and has reached that summit from where he has an expansive perspective of reality and he is able to easily detach from the worldly object, get himself out of worldliness. Yadahi nendriyarteshu na karmashvanujajate, na karmashvanusajjate, yadahi nendriyarteshu. He is defining who is a Yoga Rudha. How do we define a Yoga Rudha? Yadahi na indriyarteshu na karmashu anushajjate karma sankalpa sannyasi yoga rudhas tadochyate. Krishna says, who is a Yoga Rudha? He says, the one who does not engage in constant sense gratification. Na indriyarteshu, constantly longing to gratify the senses, engaging in all activities purely for the purpose of bodily gratification. Also, na karmashvanusajjate, the one who does not pursue actions purely for the sake of possessing and enjoying. The summum bonum of life should not become just enjoying sensual pleasures. A Yoga Rudha is one. Every action that we do, what is the motivation of an action? We do primarily because to get something. No, always the motivation is to get something back. Every action that we do is to have something, to possess something. That longing, the drive to constantly keep accumulating is something which a Yoga Rudha is, he overcomes that drive to possess, that longing to constantly accumulate. So engaging, pursuing sense gratification. One who disengages and who does not pursue sense gratification, and sarva sankalpa sannyasi, one who renounces the delusion of his identification with his body. One who constantly keeps reminding, I am not this body, I am much more, I am beyond, I am distinct and different. And that constant contemplation helps one to look at what is ultimately good. Every action that I do, am I elevating myself spiritually? Am I elevating my consciousness which is trapped at the level of matter? So therefore, sarva sankalpa sannyasi, overcoming I-ness and mine-ness, ahankara, mamakara. Constantly telling oneself that at the end of the day, I do not own anything. Every resource that is given to me, at best I am only a trustee. I cannot claim ownership over anything, including my body. And This realization helps one to completely give up on the thinking of I-ness and minus. Sarva sankalpa sannyasi yogarudas tadochyate. In order for a yogarudha to practice this yoga, here in the 6th chapter, when Krishna talks about yoga, this is yoga of Atmavalokana, Dhyana yoga, the practice of meditation, constant contemplation, which leads to realization of one's own nature and connection with reality. The yoga ultimately is connectedness, wholeness. And therefore here Krishna says, in order for that, there is a prerequisite here, Arjuna. What is the prerequisite? The prerequisite is one must necessarily master one's mind. This is where in this chapter Krishna takes up the topic of managing one's mind. Uddhared atmanatmanam na atmanam avashadayet atmaiva hyatmano bandhu atmaiva ripuratmanaha. One of the anchor shlokas of the Gita, where Krishna talks about the importance of recognizing. First is to recognize that we have something called mind. It is the mind which is the interface between us and the world. And if we do not master this instrument called mind, then there can be no self-mastery. And if we cannot master this mind, if the mind is not conquered, then there cannot be victory in life. It is impossible to practice Dhyana Yoga if one does not manage the mind, one does not control the mind. Therefore Krishna says, Uddhared atmanatmanam na atmanam avasadiyet. One can elevate oneself only through the mind. One can degrade oneself only with the mind. Now, both are possible only with the mind. It is the mind, therefore, which is your best friend here, Arjuna. It is the same mind which can be your worst enemy here, Arjuna. So do you want your mind to be your best friend or to be your worst enemy? If we do not manage the mind, it will turn out to be your worst enemy, which will be the cause for continued degradation in your life. If you befriend your mind, and if the mind is managed, then you can constantly strive for elevation. And in that context, we all know this. If the mind is managed very well, if the mind comes to some level of focus, and even when we spend 5 minutes and we study something, even something very complex, possibly in 5 minutes we get a clear clarity on what it is all about. The same thing can take even 5 hours if the mind does not cooperate. Something very, very simple, we may even struggle to comprehend if the mind does not cooperate. So, in our own day-to-day life and living, we experience how when the mind doesn't cooperate, we always struggle all the time. The question, therefore, is how do we befriend our mind? How can our mind become our best friend? Krishna says, the mind can become your best friend when it is informed and when it is reformed. There are two important things that we need to do with our mind. The mind has to become well informed. Mind becoming well informed, this is where we need the wisdom of the Shastras. The wisdom of the Shastras help us to recognize, to discriminate, and also see our own vulnerabilities, our own weaknesses. Only when we recognize our vulnerabilities, then we can take the steps to manage those vulnerabilities. So therefore, the Shastras give us the required wisdom. So therefore, we need the mind to be well informed. This is where Shastra Jnana becomes so very important. But not only that, the next step is once we recognize vulnerabilities, how are we going to overcome them? And this is where the reformation has to happen. The sadhanas need to come in. And only when we do the sadhanas, do the karma yoga, do the jnana yoga, do the dhyana, only then reformation can happen. Only when the mind is well informed and when it is well reformed, only then the mind can become your best friend here, Arjuna. And when the mind becomes your best friend, then you can experience elevation constantly. Your progress becomes gets accelerated. And it is in that context Krishna says, therefore it is so very important here, Arjuna, you need to be very clear in terms of the role that mind plays in your life. What is important in life is life itself. It is not mind's commentary about life. All of us are so very carried away by the mind's commentary about life. Now let me give you a simple analogy so that we can easily understand this. This is cricket season, World Cup is going on. Imagine, the match is happening and the commentators are busy, doing their job, and not only the audience, not only the people who are listening, let's say even the players on the ground, they also are now starting to listen to the commentators. Now, so the batsman, Virat Kohli is playing, and as he is playing, let's say he also starts to listen to the commentators. And it happens to be Sunil Gavaskar. We know the recent controversy that has been going on, irrespective of the names. Even if the batsman is playing well, if the commentator is passing on negative comments constantly, continuously, it is sooner or later going to play in a way that the batsman is going to fail. The batsman is going to struggle. Listening to this constant commentary of the mind shapes the way we operate in our own lives. So therefore, what is important is living life not based on the mind's commentary of life. We need to shut mind's commentary of life. Only when we shut it out, because mind is a great commentator. Whether we like it or not, it will come with expert opinions all the time. Three-dimensional, not three-dimensional, multi-dimensional analysis of everything. And when we start listening to mind's commentary, we are completely defocused, completely distracted all the time. Therefore, Krishna says, it is so very important, hey Arjuna, that the mind needs to be brought to a state of calmness. And it is in that state of calmness that you can actually take charge. A mind which is disturbed all the time. There are three manufacturing defects in the mind: mala, vikshepa, avarana. Mala means impurities. Whether we like it or not, the mind is filled with impurities, not collected in this lifetime, but collected, accumulated over several lifetimes. Because the senses, the indriyas, are so very good at faithfully receiving everything from the external world. And every garbage out there is faithfully taken inside. The indriyas are designed to just bring in external stimuli to the internal world. So therefore, whether we like it or not, there are going to be impurities. It is up to us whether the mind by itself becomes a garbage bin, or we create a small garbage bin in one corner of the mind. If we do not manage the mind by itself can become a garbage bin. It's like living inside a garbage bin. We all need a garbage bin at home, but there is a place for the garbage bin. It has to be in one corner somewhere, but it is required because there is going to be garbage. Similarly, we need a garbage bin in the mind as well, but if we don't create one, the mind by itself can become a garbage bin, and it's like living inside a garbage bin all the time, knowingly or unknowingly. So this is the first manufacturing defect, mala. Vikshepa, second manufacturing defect. Mind is constantly oscillating. Constantly oscillating. We can be anywhere here in the world, but within seconds it will go all around the world and come back. It's oscillating, it's going on, it's traveling everywhere, whether we like it or not. It's always in a state of distress because of the rajas. It is constantly on the move, on the move. That is the reason why the mind, in order for the mind to settle down, it requires a lot of effort. Why? Because it is the manufacturing defect. Vikshepa is the second dosha. Mala is the first dosha. Vikshepa is the second dosha. The third is avarana. Avarana is the wheel of ignorance, like a curtain, dark curtain. A wheel of ignorance which completely covers. It's like when a dark curtain covers a lamp, then there is no illumination in the room. The lamp can still be glowing, but if we put a dark cloth around it, the room becomes dark. Avarana is the wheel of ignorance which covers the natural illumination of the Atman. And therefore, these three defects make it so very difficult for us. Forget about controlling or mastering the mind, managing the mind. So it is in the context, therefore, Krishna talking about the mind, Krishna talks about the need for dhyana, the need for taking an appointment with ourselves. This is one common question I keep asking everyone. In your busy calendars, busy schedules, all of us use calendars, and our calendars are filled with meetings and conferences and events and whatnot. Do we have time for an appointment with ourselves? Do we take an appointment with ourselves? This is so very important. So very important, because solitude is so very crucial for us, whether we realize it or not. The whole world forcefully realized the importance of physical distancing. Couple of years back, when the pandemic happened, we were all forced to start physically distancing ourselves in order to fight the germs all around. Now, in order to fight the germs of temptation, the germs of distraction, we also need some kind of distancing, some kind of solitude. Now, solitude is not just about physical distancing. Physical distancing is also needed. It is important for us to also not be exposed to unwanted things all the time. No, we cannot take someone who has a weakness for alcohol and keep taking them every day on a road where there are so many shops and ask them to exercise restraint and self-control. It is not possible. One must avoid taking the route altogether if there is a weakness. Now, physical isolation, seclusion is so very important, no doubt, but seclusion is not just about physical isolation. Seclusion is isolation from the external world. Now, we also, in today's context, when we say external world, we also need to divide it into two. Isolation from the external physical world, isolation from the external virtual world. Because we can be physically isolated sitting in the room with our mobile phone in the hand. We don't need anything else. The world is already there in the pocket, in the mobile phone. So, luckily, in good old days, they did not have this challenge. So when they physically isolated themselves, when somebody went to Rishikesh and Haridwar and Badrinath, they were so very happy. No distractions, the beauty of Himalayas and the Lord there. They had a great time. Now, in the Himalayas with the mobile phone in the hand, physical isolation alone is not enough. One needs to also, therefore, physical seclusion from the physical world and the virtual world. These two can be categorized as outer world. And there is one more world from which we also need isolation. There is an inner world. So there are three levels of seclusion. Seclusion from the outer physical world, seclusion from the outer virtual world, seclusion from the inner world, which is our mind. We need to distance ourselves from the outer world, distance ourselves from the inner world. Because even when we distance from the outer world, even if we throw the mobile phone, our outer world is still very, very active. and we can get stressed out doing nothing. And therefore that distancing of the inner world is so very important as well. So therefore solitude is essentially distancing ourselves from all the three. And as we practice the solitude, so essentially when we say take an appointment with your own self, is ensuring that there is no intrusion from the outer world. There is no intrusion also from the inner world, our own mind, bringing the distance between me and my mind. That distance, as that distance grows, the quality of life also grows. That the whole sadhana is about bringing that distance and that seclusion. That seclusion, what is that objective of the seclusion? We may immediately ask. When Krishna talks about dhyana yoga, you must understand that this seclusion must culminate in connection, in spiritual connection. The material seclusion must result in spiritual connection. That's the whole point of doing this sadhana. Doing this sadhana is in such a way that we can reconnect with our spiritual essence. We can reconnect with our spiritual master. So therefore, what is the object of dhyana and what is the objective of dhyana? Object means what is the object of my meditation? And objective, why should I meditate? What do I gain? What is the outcome of the meditation? When we ask these two questions, the answer is the same for both. Krishna is the object of dhyana. Krishna is also the objective of dhyana. We meditate on him, and we meditate on him to attain him, to experience him. So therefore Krishna says, then he goes through the whole process of how this dhyana has to be performed, how to physically seclude oneself, how to mentally seclude oneself, and how to bring the mind to a state of calmness and focus on the object of meditation, which is Krishna, seeking the objective, which is Krishna. So therefore, a good part of this chapter, Krishna also deals with the very process of performing dhyana. Gives various tips in terms of how to make us very comfortable. How can we ensure that the body is at ease? How can we ensure the environment is supporting? We need choosing the right place, choosing the right time, choosing the right posture. All of this helps in achieving the objective of doing dhyana. Now, one question here, Krishna talks about the asanas and how dhyana need to be performed in the context of yoga. We also need to recognize that yoga is not just about asanas. In today's world, when people talk about yoga, they are primarily talking about asanas. We need to realize that asanas will not bring freedom from our vasanas. Asanas are only one small component of yoga. Asana is one limb of 8 limbs of yoga. Yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. Of this 8-limbed yoga, asanas, so even before we come to asana, before we start practicing dhyana with the right posture, there are certain prerequisites. The prerequisites being yama and niyama. Now, yama and niyama, put it simply, are codes of conduct for right living. These are fundamental, the way we shape our life and living. Yama can be defined as outer restraints, niyama, inner observances. Yamas can be defined as the rules, the code of conduct that governs the way we engage with the world. Niyamas are the codes of conduct that govern the way we engage ourselves. Very, very important before we even come to asanas, because many times we have this question, we have the right kind of asana. We can practice, all the physical postures can be very perfect. The body can really, benefit from doing all the right kind of asanas, no doubt. But the mind can still not cooperate. So therefore, one needs to necessarily apply these codes of conduct, yamas and niyamas. Ahimsa, asteya, satya, brahmacharya, aparigraha. Ahimsa, this is the primary code of conduct, the yama, which is ahimsa. Ahimsa, which is non-violence in not just deed, in thought, word and deed. Non-violence in thought, word and deed. We all practice ahimsa very effectively when it comes to the deed part, because we normally don't really harm physically anyone, by and large. We can't. But when it comes to word and thought, we need to constantly keep reflecting the kind of speech that we use and the thought process that goes on. Therefore, ahimsa is not very easy to practice, but when one practices ahimsa, it helps, it goes a great extent to manage and conquer our mind. Ahimsa. Satya, truthfulness. Asteya. Asteya is non-stealing. Non-stealing, do not steal, the Shastras say. All of us are, we have one immediate answer is obviously we don't steal. How come we steal? How can anybody, call us, robbers? But whether we recognize it or not, we all steal. We are all robbers. How? According to the Shastras, anybody who takes more than they give is a robber. Anybody who consumes more than they contribute. So therefore, asteya means contributing more than consumption. We have to put an equation. Contribution minus consumption. Is it positive or negative? If it is positive, asteya. If it is negative, then it is not asteya. So therefore, ahimsa, asteya, satya. Satya, aparigraha. Aparigraha, non-possessiveness, not trying to possess things all the time. This need to possess, this craving to possess, we are always wanting to have something because our happiness is always defined by what we have and not who we are. And therefore, one of the fundamental yamas therefore is to practice aparigraha. Aparigraha, non-possessory attitude. These are yamas, these are the codes of conduct that govern our interaction with the world. These are external restraints. There are inner observances, internal observances, codes of conduct for our own engaging ourselves. How do we govern our own self-engagement? Shaucha, santosha, Shaucha, Santosha, Brahmacharya, Tapas, Swadhyaya, Ishvara Pranidhana. Purity. Purity is Shaucha, purity in all forms. Santosha, contentment. Then Ishvara Pranidhana, surrendering to the Lord, surrendering to Bhagavan. Recognizing that unless we surrender, unless we cultivate the value of humility, there is no way that we can acquire more knowledge. Acquisition of knowledge also has a prerequisite of surrender, of humility. And brahmacharya, non-excess, temperance. All these are prerequisites for the limb of asanas of yoga. So therefore, it is very important to fashion our own life and living. So Krishna says, dhyana, practice of dhyana is so very vital, but how do you complement it? We can only practice dhyana when we have a lifestyle that suits, that accommodates. We cannot have a lifestyle that is conflicting with the practice of dhyana. So how do you practice, how do you fashion a lifestyle that complements the sadhana of dhyana? Krishna gives a simple formula. Yuktahara viharasya, yukta cheshtasya karmasu, yukta swapnavabhodasya. yogo bhavati dukkhaha, he says. Simple, very, very simple formula. Yukta ahara, essentially what he is talking about is moderation of everything that we do. Yukta ahara, eat moderately. Don't dump yourself. Instead of dumping, be very, very moderate in terms of what one eats. If one eats waste all the time, it will only reflect in one's waste all the time. One needs to be constant. We'll constantly be looking at what is one consuming. What one consumes, so very important. It determines one's nature. That is the reason why sattvika ahara is recommended all the time. If sattva guna has to be cultivated, what goes in also should be sattvic in nature. We cannot have tamasic and rajasic ahara and try to cultivate sattva. So yukta ahara, yukta vihara. Luckily for us, Krishna is not saying no to any entertainment. He says entertainment is fine. It is just that it has to be balanced. It has to be moderate. It is impossible. It is not practical. Krishna also recognizes it. For all householders, people who are engaged, living in the world, they cannot live as ascetics. So some amount of entertainment is fine. We need to engage, but constructive entertainment, healthy entertainment, which will also engage the senses in a healthy way. Moderate. Yukta vihara, yukta ahara, yukta vihara. Yukta cheshtasya karmasu. Also, work that one does, there has to be some restraints. There is no point in working for 16 hours every day, saying that I am the one who am very sincere in doing work. One cannot sustain. It is not practical. At some point, one will break down completely. There has to be temperance. There has to be moderation, so that one is constantly at one's peak. Peak performance is only possible when one knows the borders, the limits, and therefore moderation in every work that we do is so very important. Yukta ahara viharasya, yukta cheshtasya karmasu, yukta swapnavabhodasya. Also sleep in moderation, Krishna says. 8 hours of sleep is fine. Many of us require 8 hours of sleep. So we don't need to force ourselves to sleeping only, because if we don't sleep at the right time, we will sleep at the wrong time. If an afternoon nap is required, please have the nap and then come to satsang. If you don't sleep in the afternoon, you will sleep here. So sleep is so very important, but it has to be moderated in such a way that we get the required replenishment of the energy and we also do not overdo it. Now, this lifestyle that Krishna is talking about is very simple. He essentially is saying, always look out for balance in everything that you do. Don't stretch anything, because if we start stretching, there will be a break point somewhere. Do not stretch anything. Take everything in its own course. Everyone has a different constitution. The body constitution is so very different, and therefore one needs to be always watchful in terms of how this instrument of the body, mind and intelligence that is given to us, how it is put to use properly. And when it is put to use properly, and when the lifestyle is shaped in such a way that it complements dhyana, then one can, over a period of time, can practice the sadhana of dhyana so very easily. And Krishna then gives a way, a process as to how this science of yoga can be actually practically applied on a day-to-day basis. How these 3 defects, these 3 deficiencies of mala, vikshepa, avarana, how can we actually overcome these 3 deficiencies, 3 defects? How practically can we practice this yoga of dhyana? Krishna says, Shanair Shanair Uparamed. Shanair Shanair Uparamed. Krishna is so very compassionate. He knows. Gradually, slowly, no hurry. No hurry to do anything dramatically. There is nothing which will happen if you exert yourself to do anything dramatically. Take one step at a time. Shanair Shanair Uparimed. Buddhyadriti grihitaya. Atma samstam manakritva. Kaschid api chintayet, Krishna says. Says, Shanair Shanam is gradually. A progress has to be very gradual. So take one step at a time, turning inward, because we are by design focused outward. Our senses are tuned to catch every stimuli that comes from the outside world. The mind is constantly focused outward. To turn the mind inward cannot happen overnight. So he says, Shanair Shanair Uparimed. Slowly and steadily, gradually turn inwards. Now, how do we do that? He says, Buddhya Dhriti Grihitaya. We all have been given a wonderful instrument called Buddhi, intelligence. Using this intelligence, you can discriminate. Now, intelligence, Buddhi, is like a knife. With a knife, we can cut through, analyze, cutting through things, to see what is right, what is wrong, do the discrimination, cutting through. But also it is very important that when we use a knife, we also need to be constantly looking out that nothing sticks to it. Otherwise the knife becomes not usable. When we are cutting vegetables, we will never use the knife to cut anything else after cutting onions. You cut onions, the onion smell sticks to the knife. Then if you cut a mango with it, the mango doesn't taste good. Look, anything, if it starts sticking to the knife over a period of time, imagine the knife starts getting accumulated with lots of things with which it cuts. It becomes not usable at all. Similarly, if the intelligence, the buddhi, when it starts to identify with things, it also becomes tainted. The knife which is supposed to cut, analyze, discriminate, distorts the reality. This is that identification of the buddhi with something will result in distortion of reality. Many of us possibly know this famous Akbar Birbal story. It seems Akbar, when he was a child, was nursed, not by his mother, by a nurse. A nurse was taking care of Akbar. She was feeding him and taking care of him. And it so happened that the nurse also had a child who was elder to Akbar, so who also grew along with Akbar, and Akbar was so very fond of him and he started considering him as his own elder brother. And this person was a crook. He was playing mind games with Akbar, constantly saying, see what, you and I are, we drink the milk from the same mother. I am your elder brother, so therefore you have to treat me as your elder brother. So Akbar used to treat this son of the nurse as his elder brother, pampered him with everything, and everybody in the kingdom were worried. Where is this going to lead? And as they grew, this only Akbar was so much identified, constantly, everywhere he goes, he's my elder brother. Both of us drank milk from the same mother, So, and came a day when, he started demanding gifts, and Akbar said, okay, take away these many villages. He said, then this elder brother, he said, you know what, Akbar, thank you for all that, but then there is something with you which I don't have. Akbar said, what? See, you have various ministers who can advise you. I have nobody to advise me. So I want one of your ministers to come along with me. But said, okay, take. And this man looked around and said, you know what, I want Birbal. He is the best and I want him. Akbar was so attached with this elder brother of his. And he said, fine, take Birbal. Birbal was shocked. He said, Birbal looked around, he composed himself and then said, Jahanpana, you know what? He is your elder brother. He deserves my elder brother, which he I know. Therefore, I will send my elder brother to him. Everybody is wondering, oh, is it? So, okay, let me bring my elder brother tomorrow. And then everybody in the morning in the court were assembled. And then Birbal walks in with his elder brother. He was bringing along a big bull with him. He said, here is my elder brother, he can go with him. That man was furious and he said, how can you call him elder brother? You know what? Both of us drank milk from the same mother. Finally, Akbar realized, what the issue was. When the mind, buddhi, is so very attached and identified, it distorts the reality. And therefore, only when this knife-like mind is constantly cleaned, cleansed, so that it's not tainted, it does not carry any dirt with it, can it really do its job. So Krishna says, Shanair Shanair Uparimet Buddhya Dhriti Grihitaya. One needs to be steadfast to use one's intelligence in the right way, and one needs to be courageous to take some very strong decisions. After discrimination, one should, knowing what is wrong and what is right, one needs to ensure that one always chooses what is right. And when this process goes on, step by step, shanair, shanair, nothing, no magic will happen in 2 minutes. Nirvana will not happen in 2 minutes. One needs to constantly keep working. Shanair, shanair, uparimed, buddhya dhriti grihitaya, atma samstham manah kritva, akinchidapi chintaye. Only then the chintana that is constantly happening in mind, constantly, there is this virus in the mind. Today everybody says mind is like a computer, right? And we all know there is no computer today which has no antivirus program, right? Automatically, we not only pay for an antivirus program when we buy a new computer, we have to constantly keep upgrading it, because so many new viruses are coming all the time. The viruses can delete the files, can corrupt the files, it can also crash the computer itself. The viruses in our mind also do all these things, delete files. When we want something, we forget, the file is deleted, it is not there. The most wanted file goes missing. Corruption happens, corruption virus in the mind, the worry virus. When the mind is corrupted, we are always constantly, what is going to happen? What is going to happen? What if? All of us are so good in doing this multi-dimensional analysis of something which has never happened or is not going to happen, but we are in a state of worry all the time, this worry virus. And just like how computer can crash, the mind can also crash. And sometimes to prevent that crash, we use artificial inducements. Some intoxicants are taken to temporarily numb the mind. But that's not a solution at all. And therefore Krishna says, this dhyana of Krishna, when Krishna dhyana happens, Krishna is the antivirus program that we all need. When this antivirus called Krishna enters, he ensures that all kinds of viruses, the world is manufacturing new viruses every day, but there is only one antivirus program. In the case of a computer, we need different kinds of antivirus programs, because every antivirus program tackles one set of types of viruses. But Krishna is one antivirus program, all kinds of viruses he cleanses, he keeps cleansing, purifying. And therefore Krishna says to Arjuna, what is so very important is, as you keep practicing this slowly and steadily, you will start seeing the results, and the results will be in such a way that eventually one who is practicing this yoga of dhyana will reach a state where one will start to experience supreme bliss. Krishna says, prashantamanasam henam yoginam sukhamuttamam upayati shantarajasam brahmabhutam akalmasham, he says. The process, hey Arjuna, is step by step. If you take the process, in this shloka, we need to take the shloka and build a ladder out of the shloka, where Krishna says, the yoginam, one who practices the dhyana of yogi, akalmasham. In the shloka, they may not be in steps, but need to break down and create a ladder so that we can understand how the process progresses. First step is the practice of dhyana yoga, yoginam, akalmasham. Akalmasha means the impurities are cleansed, the cleansing of impurities starts. The more we contemplate on Krishna, the cleansing starts, akalmasham, the impurities go. And as the impurities reduce, shantarajasam, the rajasic qualities, the tamasic qualities slowly and steadily get weakened, and we cultivate sattva. And as we cultivate sattva, prashantamanasam, we overcome the delusion of our own identity with our body. We start to recognize that we are distinct and different, and then brahmabhuta, we are situated in that state of experiencing ourselves, and that leads to sukhamuttamam. Ultimately, one starts to experience that supreme bliss. Krishna says this is a gradual process. Hey Arjuna, do not expect you start today and tomorrow you want the results. It will take time, but one needs to be patient, and one needs to patiently keep practicing this. And as one keeps practicing this, guaranteed that one will reach a state where one can experience Atmavalokana. One can experience one's own true nature and experience that glorious state of being blissful. And in that context, then Krishna says, what is important here, Arjuna, now? Now that you understand what is Dhyana Yoga, now that you understand how to contemplate this contemplation needs to be complemented with the lifestyle. Recognize that as you start practicing this, this also leads to a state where one starts to recognize that everyone is equal. The vision of equality is a natural outcome of this performance of this Dhyana Yoga. Arjuna immediately has a question. Hey Krishna, all this is great. Now Arjuna always asks right questions on our behalf. And Arjuna says, all this is great. But there is one problem here, hey Krishna. He says, what is this problem here, Arjuna? He says, Chanchalam hi mana Krishna pramadi balavadridam tasyaham nigraham manye vayoriva sudushkaram. All this is fine, but now you are asking us to work with something which seems to be faster than even the wind. I can even control the wind, but it looks like I cannot control this mind. Chanchalam hi mana Krishna. Hey Krishna, by design, the mind is chanchala, is fickle. Chanchalam hi mana Krishna. Pramathi balavad dridam. Pramathi. It is also by design turbulent. Balavad. By design it seems to be powerful. That is why Krishna says, you have a lot of power with you, Arjuna. If you don't tap the power, you will be trapped by its power. It is like electricity. Electricity has great power. Electricity can be used to cook, to heat, to illuminate, to do everything. The same electricity, if it is not properly used, we cannot go and touch the live wire. It can even kill. Similarly, the power is great, but how do you tap that power? Arjuna raises the question. It seems to be too powerful. No, it's almost formidable. It is so very challenging for me to overcome its force. Balavad dridham. It is also unyielding. It looks like every time I sit, I want to think Krishna, something else comes in my mind. It is unyielding all the time. Chanchalam hi mana Krishna, pramati balavad dridham, tasyaham nigraham manye vayoriva sudushkraham. It is even more difficult to control the mind than even the wind. So therefore, I want you to, hey Krishna, give me a simple formula with which I can use, which we can apply so that I can manage the fickleness of the mind. I can manage the unyielding mind. I can manage this turbulent mind. How do I do that? Krishna looks at Arjuna and says, Arjuna, I will give you a simple answer, but it is something, the simple answer is not simple when it comes to implementation. I will give you a simple answer. The answer is twofold. He says, Abhyasa, Vairagya. Abhyasa, Vairagya. Practice. Abhyasa is constant, repeated practice. Vairagya, practice of detachment from worldly things, trying to avoid worldly thoughts. Now, this Abhyasa and Vairagya that Krishna prescribes can be very easily understood. There is this famous story. It seems there was this man who was serving his master in an ashram. This rishi in the ashram, he stayed there and he was every day, day in out, he was very faithfully serving his master, and the rishi was so very pleased with him. And one fine day he looked at the young man and said, young man, you have been serving me so very well. Now the time has come for me to give you a reward. So here is the reward. He gives him a lamp and he says, you know what, this lamp has a genie in it, and go home and the genie is all yours. Rub the lamp, the genie will come and the genie will give you whatever you want. The genie will give you whatever you want. But as the young man was going out, the master said, but there is one thing, watch out. The genie is hyperactive, very, very demanding. You have to ensure that it is always occupied, otherwise it will take back everything and even more than what it gave you. So that is one caveat, watch out for it. So this young man goes home, is very happy. Now he's got something, he can now get anything that he wants in the world. So he goes home, immediately takes the lamp and then rubs the lamp, and out comes the genie. Master, what should I do for you? What can I do for you? Immediately say, hey genie, arrange 100-course dinner for me. I've been starving. And then immediately, instantaneously, there right in front of him on the floor, there's a 100-course meal that anybody can even ever, unimaginable number of items out there. And the man is so happy, excited, he pounces and starts to eat. But then the genie is so very hyperactive. Immediately, as just before even he could start with one course or finish with one course of the meal, the genie looks at him and says, Master, what can I do for you? Now he knows, now he has to make the genie do something, otherwise it's going to take away everything that is given. He says, okay, you know what now? Build me the best palace on this planet. So luxurious that it should have everything that that an emperor would ever have. Immediately, and then this man thought it is going to take time for the genie to build this palace, and just as he was about to start enjoying his meal, right in front of him, lo and behold, there is a massive palace right there. The genie with its immediately magically creates that palace right there. This man now is in a dilemma whether to enter and enjoy the palace or even finish his meal. As he was in that dilemma, the genie immediately asks him, Master, what should I do for you now? Now, he knows if he doesn't keep this genie occupied, it's going to take everything back. Now, this man is now is distraught. Now he doesn't know what to do. It looks like his whole occupation is to keep the genie occupied. He is not able to enjoy anything that he has. Now he thinks of his master, and then his master gives him a message. And the master says, let me give you a formula what you should do, implement that, and then you will be free of this genie. So immediately then genie asks him, Master, what should I do for you? What can I do for you? The young man looks at the genie and says, Genie, you know what? Immediately go, bring me a long pole. And then the genie rushes, brings a long pole. Dig the hole, put the long pole here and start climbing up and down, up and down, up and down. And then the genie starts climbing up and down and up and down. Now he has all the time that he has to enjoy his food, enjoy the palace. Now he realizes how to keep the genie occupied when he wants it. Up and down, up and down, up and down is abhyasa, vairagya. Essentially the mind, Krishna says, the only two ways is constant practice, abhyasa. Constantly one practices abhyasa and vairagya. That is the only way, Arjuna, that you can turn this mind slowly and steadily inward. And as it starts turning inward, as one starts to experience one's own inner nature, then the magic will happen. And that progress, step by step progress will also happen. And Krishna also tells Arjuna, do not be worried, Arjuna. Even if you were to give up in between, see how very compassionate Krishna is as a master. He says, even for whatever reason, if this sadhana that you're doing has to be given up at some time, you will always start where you left off the next time when you get back. Even if you leave this current janma at wherever you are in the sadhana, you will always restart from wherever you are. Such is the power of the sadhana that you do. Therefore, whatever effort that you put in is not going to be wasted. Is not going to be wasted, because every ounce of effort that you put in here, Arjuna, is going to help you only to grow, to elevate yourself higher and higher and higher. And therefore, there is no need for you to worry about the obstacles that would come in your way. Having said that, then Krishna, towards the end of the 6th chapter, lays the foundation for the transition into the next Shadga. Now, if we look at the 3 doshas, the 3 defects, Mala, Vikshepa, Avarana. Now, what is the solution that Krishna recommends to Arjuna? Krishna says, in order to purify yourself, hey Arjuna, in order to decrease your impurities, the solution for mala is to perform nishkama karma. Nishkama karma is performing actions rooted in the principle of detachment. Anashrita karma pala, not taking refuge in the results of your action. Renouncing the attachment to the results. So therefore, nishkama karma, the more one performs nishkama karma, greater is the purification of the mind. So at the first level, mala can be decreased by performing nishkama karma. Then comes vikshepa, oscillation of the mind, the disturbances in the mind. How do I manage the agitations? That is where dhyana yoga comes into play. By performing dhyana yoga, regular practice of dhyana, the vikshepa of the mind can be addressed. Then comes avarana, the most difficult, the third, which is the veil of ignorance that covers our own true nature. And for that, Krishna gives the solution. He says, this avarana can be, the solution to this is jnana. And jnana, which eventually has to blossom into bhakti. And towards the end of the chapter, Krishna says, hey Arjuna, performing the sadhanas of yoga is so very important, but I consider the yoga of bhakti to be the superior and the bhakti yogi to be the most dear to me. He says, yoginam api sarvesham madgatenantaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yomam sameyukta tamo mataha. Yoginam api sarvesham madgatenantaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yomam sameyukta tamo mataha. Yoginam api sarvesham, of all the yogis, I consider bhakti yogi to be the most supreme, the most effective of all the yogas. The reason why Krishna prescribes bhakti yoga, and this is the transition now that Krishna is making from the first Shadga to the second Shadga. The transition where he is now, the second Shadga is devoted to bhakti yoga, so he's making the transition, so he's laying the foundation. He says, of all the yogas, bhakti yoga is the one which is the pathway to attain me, and therefore realize that bhakti yogi is the one who I consider as the supreme of all the kinds of yogis. So for all of us, when we talk about bhakti, we say bhakti is definitely has to be a part of life. No doubt. But we must recognize that this life is part of bhakti. Now, how do we understand that? This life, this very life is a part of bhakti, because bhakti in its larger sense is our multi-life journey seeking love to fulfill our deepest longing, the deepest longing of everlasting love and eternal existence. And this multi-life journey of seeking love can only be fulfilled through bhakti yoga. And therefore Krishna says, hey Arjuna, let me give you one final tip before I conclude this chapter. You have already talked about how formidable the mind is and how difficult it is for you to master the mind. I know that it is a struggle for you to manage and conquer your mind. No doubt, it is definitely a struggle. But let me also tell you, it need not be a solitary struggle. When you practice bhakti, it can be a cooperative conquest. Because when you do bhakti, you are not struggling with your mind, you are delegating, mastering your mind to Krishna, and that is where bhakti helps one to manage and conquer one's mind. And it is with this declaration, Krishna lays that pathway of transition into the 7th chapter, where in the process of highlighting the significance of bhakti yoga, finally, after 6 chapters of the Gita, Krishna starts to talk about himself. Until now in the picture, the focus light has not been on the hero. Now the hero is going to get fully introduced with the starting of the 7th chapter. Until then, let us keep contemplating on the importance of taking an appointment with our own self, the significance of solitude, seclusion from all the three worlds, the outer physical world, the outer virtual world, and our inner world, recognizing that the object and the objective of our dhyana both are Krishna. Sarvam Sri Krishna Arpanamastu.